Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. On today's episode, Zoe Darazsdi joins us to discuss her work as a mental health counselor empowering neurodivergent people. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Zoe, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
I would love to start off by learning, where does your kind of autism story begin? Where does your story in the autism community start?
I think back to even like my earliest memories, and I can really remember a lot of feeling, fundamentally different in a way that in retrospect was autism. Like even being like 3, and I had this ability to, if you read like an entire book to me out loud, like I can recite like pages and pages of text from memory, like having only heard it once. And I remember like, but that was a thing I had to do. So that story program at the library, going up to the librarian and just reciting the book back to her. She'd be like, okay, you're moving into the craft portion. And I'd be like, no, 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 sit tight. A lot of those sort of behaviors that were just like unique, let's say. But I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania at a time before anybody was going to look at a hyperverbal little girl and think, oh, this person is autistic. So I wasn't diagnosed until I was 19. And at that point, I felt like just completely up, what's creek without a paddle. Like receiving a autism diagnosis as an adult woman, and then sort of looking around for well, what are my resources, what are my options, and going online and finding things that are exclusively geared towards children and things that are pretty disparaging toward autistic people, and just feeling like, okay, so thus begins my journey of how I can be a positive force for our community, because I wasn't finding a lot of that at the time.
And your journey's led you to become a mental health counselor who's had nearly a decade of experience empowering neurodivergent people. So I think empowerment is such an important word because so many of us have navigated anti autistic bias and have felt disempowered. Where do you think we are in terms of this bias right now, specifically in therapeutic settings?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think in our larger society, it has felt like 10 steps forward, 11 steps back at times. In the past few years, there's been so much more talk and awareness, but then there's also been a lot of disparagement systemically. I think that in the so I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of PA and in Delaware. And I coach people from all over the world. I conduct research, things like that. I feel like the mental health community is so scattered in their understanding and ability to support autistic people. A long time ago, I stopped wanting to go to like therapist meetups, because there was always this thing of, all the therapists sitting around. Well, who do you work with? Well, what population do you work with? And people would, say all sorts of things, addictions, like domestic violence, like all, perfectly like common in the counseling world, but challenging, right? Nonetheless. And then I would say autism, and people would be like, "Oh, oh, that's hard. Whoa, and I'm like, oh, okay. This is, you feel this is like head and shoulders above everything else that everybody else listed here. And people would say things like, "Oh, that's a community that I have a really hard time with." I had an autistic client and would just sort of rattle off all these like criticisms of that person. And it was uncomfortable for me. One, because I don't relate to that at all. I deeply enjoy my job and working with the autistic community. And I think it's a great privilege. And two, because I am autistic. And they're sitting here dogging on autistic people, and I am one. And like it never occurs to them that like they could be dogging on me. Right. So I was oof, it was uncomfy. But I think that there is a growing understanding among some people of what autism is. The research at this point is from 2022. Lipsinki et al. 2022 conducted the study with like over 400 mental health practitioners, and they found that like people do not know a lot about autism, and that they kind of think they do know a lot about autism, and that the less you know, the lower your opinion of autistic people is. And I do find that across the board where people will like because autistic people are common, right? Like I mean, we make up a decent percentage of the population. A lot of counselors have worked with them. Not a lot of counselors can empathize effectively, and not a lot of them, I think, know enough about autism to really be effective. Now, I just dumped a lot of negative information, and I do not want to discourage people from pursuing counseling. Uh, but I think, in other words, like this is a big part of why I do like counselor education because even just that like humility aspect is so important of like the amount of people who are like, yeah, I know all about autism. My nephew's autistic. He's 5. He's the poster child in my mind for every autistic person who could ever come through my door, or my office. That type of just like assumed, like, oh, I know everything about this community is often what hurts us in counseling sessions. I think even just like counselors having humility and deferring to autistic people as the expert on what it's like to be autistic goes a very long way.
I loved all of that because when people learn that I support other autistic people, they will say some of those very same things and and will just assume I'm not autistic, which I'm very autistic. I'll let you know. The other thing people will say, and I imagine you have gotten this over the years, probably every therapist, coach, whoever, anyone that's supported autistic people, people will say to me, "Oh, you're so patient." And my thought is I'm not patient at all. I just listen to people. And I think when you listen to people about their lived experience, then patience is not even a thing.
Yeah, I think that maybe a person would feel impatient if they decided how another person should think and feel, and they were just waiting to successfully goad that person into, you know, doing what they think they should do. Then that we kind of always have to respect.
Talking about empowerment, I think one of the things that we as a community of autistic people struggle with is our self esteem. What have you observed in terms of factors that might lead to low self esteem with your clients before they start counseling with you?
Yeah, so I think that there's sort of two interesting experiences there. One of the person who was diagnosed as a child. And I mean, granted, when you're a kid, you can't really and you don't know everything, sure. But when a lot of your sort of instinctual behaviors are micromanaged, that really depletes your self-esteem. When you have these behavior plans that are focused heavily on masking and on, eliminating your harmless stims, things like that. Um, and I think it also trains you toward pursuing normality at the cost of everything else. So just really even if you're not being treated particularly well in a setting or you don't click with people there or whatever, just pursuing friendship with like the normal people doing the normal thing, masking in every relationship is something that really hurts a person's self-esteem because it inherently asserts that the way you naturally are is not like nobody would want to be here. You have to be editing yourself and controlling yourself in every way in order to be accepted. And I think it's like similarly, for people who weren't diagnosed and didn't necessarily have that upfront, hey, there is something different about you, and we have to try to amend it as if it is an illness. There's just that general feeling of being so confused and so lost. Like I have quite a few alien tattoos, and I got those before I was diagnosed because I always felt a little bit alien. And I remember growing up and just being like, I am weird. I am so weird. And, teachers and things saying, don't say that, Zoe. That's a self fulfilling prophecy. That's a mean thing to say about yourself, And I would think, like, oh, no, it's not even like I'm not even like, it's not criticism. It's just an observation. Like, there's something up with me. I am not I am not falling in line like other people are. And sometimes it's a point of pride, and a lot of the times it's a point of pain, but I know no other way. And I don't know what that's going to mean for me as I get older. And I think that is a lot of where that self-esteem challenge comes for people.
I realized at 8 years old, there's something up with me. And there was the quest to figure that out, and I'm so thankful I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm often thankful. Like as much as there's a lot of challenges in this era for autistic people. Um, I am thankful to be born in the generation that I am, because earlier generations have had it even harder, I would say.
Now, I'm wondering, as your work as a counselor, if there might be patterns you've observed in your work that have led to empowering those of us that are neurodivergent.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have been given so much feedback on like social challenges that are not actually challenges. And it just results in them having a very disempowered relationship with other humans. So, like, there's a huge focus growing up on like this surface level of being normal. Make eye contact. Don't like for me, I twirl my hair incessantly. It's my step. Don't do that with your hair. That's weird. Don't flap your hands. Make the right face at the right time. Mm, And these are all like foot in the door level, incredibly surface level social differences that don't really hurt anybody, and that don't really prevent a deep connection with someone and with yourself, right? They're usually self-regulated behaviors, and those get really targeted and fixated. And then I think part of that is because when you have a parent or a teacher or something of an autistic kid, they're like just trying to identify the easiest and most obvious differences and get you to eliminate them because they think that that's like the barrier of entry for how we could possibly turn this ship around and get you to live the adult life that we've envisioned for you. A very like neurotypical adult life. And that creates a tremendous amount of either like just shame in a person. Like they're always so embarrassed because they always feel like they're in trouble and they always feel like they're doing something wrong. Or, and this is sort of a indirect reaction to the shame, an incredible amount of defensiveness of like, I'm not going to work on any of even the more like meaningful like social challenges that come up that like genuinely prevent maybe like healthy relationships as an autistic adult. So things like not really understanding how to have a reciprocal conversation with somebody, right? That will prevent a good friendship. Or like not understanding how to check in with friends and make sure you're being supportive, that will prevent you from being close with people. Those things don't even get touched upon. Those are the things that actually matter and impact you. And so essentially you wind up with people who are like really lonely, and they don't have to be. And they don't have the support that they deserve of like a community behind them. And they don't have like a feeling of being sure in themselves. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I think that that's like where a lot of the disempowerment lies.
Now, I've read that one of the principles that guides your work is disability rights activism. How does that activism impact how you support people as a mental health counselor?
Yeah, using a disability rights lens for autism is both like a counteraction to what we've had like the medical model for years. And also just like helps you to sort of be adaptable as an autistic person. So the medical model, for anybody who doesn't know, is sort of this predominant way that we've viewed autism for a really long. And it basically treats autism, it defines autism by the ways that it causes you to be sort of a defunct version of a neurotypical person. Like, yo, you have all these symptoms that make you different in a bad way. And it asserts that, like, we can target these and fix them. And that, like, if we do that, it's like curing a sickness, right? Like, you could be better. And in reality, autism is a disability. It's not a sickness, it doesn't go away. It's just like a different way that your brain is structured. And there's strengths to it and there's challenges to it. And it's not helpful to put all your focus into curing a thing that's incurable. It's much more helpful to like just think about how we can adapt to the world around us. And I think that that also helps a lot when it comes to coping with like the systemic issues, right? Because autistic people are part of the disabled community. We are in cahoots with people who have like any other disability in that way. And we're stronger together. The autistic community is stronger when we link up with all sorts of other autistic people, even ones who do not appear similar to us. And we're stronger when we link up with larger communities. Mm, I think it just helps you to understand this interesting dichotomy of like, there are things that are happening that are unfair to you. And also, they're not going to go away. So, there are some ways in which we can cope with them and fight against them. There are other ways in which we have to radically accept them because we have no course of action. And that I think is actually the much harder skill is learning that like some things are not fair to our community. And there's also very little that any of us individually could do about that. It's not a problem with the solution, and that's what it means to be systemically oppressed, is that there are big systemic forces that hold you down that you can't fight against as one person. And then we don't have to hate ourselves or lack self-compassion just because we're having a hard time functioning in the system. The system wasn't made for us. Of course, we're not thriving. So at least it provides this like explanation as to what's going on and why you're having a hard time. It invites self compassion. Sometimes it invites solutions. A lot of the times it invites radical acceptance. Um, but at the very least, it also invites like dignity because we can understand ourselves to be just a valid version of human. Like we're no better or worse than a neurotypical person. We just like exist and we're in a community.
I really like a lot of the things you just said, but the one thing that I really connected with is the idea of acceptance. And I think it's tricky because on one hand, what do you accept? And then what do you push back against and try to change. I think that's a really tricky balance.
You're right. It definitely is because we don't want to feel complacent. I mean, honestly, like in you and I's lifetime, Doug, like there's lots of things we might never live to see. I hope we both live very, very long, very, very long.
I'm getting old, so we'll see.
But I think a little bit about like a lot of the sort of the great um, speeches that we refer to in our society as like these are great like advocacy. So, for instance, like the "I Have a Dream" speech, right? It lays out like a utopia that even if Martin Luther King Jr. had lived to see old age, he would not have lived to see. It's like this understanding that we're all moving towards something, but maybe you and I will just plant the seeds for the trees that our grandkids or great grandkids, metaphorically speaking, in the autism community, will enjoy the shade of.
Now, beyond your work as a counselor, you also conduct professional research. One of your research papers that you collaborated on was regarding decolonizing adolescent interventions. What have you learned about how we might go from marginalization to liberation when a decolonizing framework is applied to supporting adolescents?
Yeah. The word decolonizing there is kind of interesting. Um, the research team I worked with selected that word really intentionally. And essentially, like when I utilize that term, I'm talking about decolonizing one's brain from the idea that neurotypical people are like the superior masters of the universe. Like, that they're in charge, that they know best, and that we should all try to be more like them, which is a lot of how autism treatment was conceived of for, I don't know, up until today, still. But I see a lot of instances of autistic kids being put in situations that are so challenging and then punished for the ways that they're trying to like adapt and self-soothe during them. Like, I don't know about you, Doug, but I think back to high school and I'm like, how did I do that? You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like, how did I go in there every day at like 6 a.m.? Like, I was it so early every day. And it was so loud and so overstimulating. And I was white knuckling it with like my jaw clenched. Back then, I had so many like gastrointestinal issues. I had such bad headaches all the time. I was like a sickly child, a sickly teen. And those went away as soon as I left high school. Those were just stress induced issues of like not even the curriculum, because that was fine, of the environment. And like there's just such needlessly overstimulating things happening in the day to day life of an autistic kid. And when meltdowns happen eventually, because somebody is not allowed to take breaks, not allowed to have any sensory devices that'll help them, nothing like that is permitted, not allowed to stim, forced into eye contact all the time when people are really not benefiting it from it that much, all this stuff. Then it's a punishment. Now it's part of the behavior plan because you cracked. You were supposed to not crack. You're supposed to endure day after day after day after day, and then go home and be pleasant and do your homework and go to sleep. Do it again the next day. And that's not reasonable. And it creates like really long-term mental health issues. And ultimately it just creates this like constant system where we're just like dog training autistic teenagers into putting up with, I mean, like just a super stressful environment. I don't know what your experience of high school was like.
It was one of the most difficult periods of my life for sure. Like nowadays, I'm up early, but like back then, like if I didn't have to go to school, I'm sleeping till noon. having to be there at like, I don't know, 6:45, 7 o'clock was like an impossible task every day in itself. And then I get there and having to go from class to class and transition in between bells and having 3 minutes in a super, super crowded hallway to get there and not having any understanding about what regulation was and the nervous system and things like that. Like I have no idea how I even, like, retained any information, let alone got through each day.
It's a miracle. Genuinely. I used to get in trouble a lot. Uh, and for like a lot, I mean, I was obstinate and rigid. If you said something that wasn't accurate as a teacher, I'd correct you. People weren't explaining to me what I was doing wrong. So when they got mad at me for correcting them, I thought that they were mad because I was incorrect. And because they disagreed with the point I was making. And then I would like double down and just explain it to them more forcefully. I didn't understand that they were mad at me because I was being impertinent. I didn't know that I was being impertinent. So things like that would just be happening all the time. I also just was dressed really weird. I didn't wear pants for like 2 years in northeastern Pennsylvania in the winter. I was wearing Victorian dresses that I sewed myself, and saying things like that because I was just like doing my own thing. And I I look back at it and I'm like, I regret not being worse. It should have been worse. I was like trying to compromise and submit as much as I humanly could, and I could have shown them a way harder time. But whatever, I survived it. But I mean, ultimately, as therapists, it's like, okay, this is a kid comes to you and is like, look how challenging my life is. I know other people are apparently just tuck and rolling and doing absolutely great in this environment, and I'm just not. And it's being treated like I'm being whiny and too sensitive and stuff like that. But I'm cracking like an egg. I can't handle this. As a therapist, it's our job to actually help them, not to be like, well, the rules of the school say that you have to be in the loudest effing cafeteria on the planet and eat your lunch. Like they know that. We don't need to be eat part of the system of oppression.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even talk about the cafeteria. I wouldn't even go to the when it was lunchtime, I wouldn't even go into the cafeteria and I would just avoid and I would, when I got my driver's license, I would go out to my car, which I got in trouble for, but I didn't really care. Um, or just be anywhere else other than the cafeteria because well, the food was terrible, but I could have I brought my own food eventually, but which was difficult because I had to get up so early and executive functioning wouldn't let me remember the day before to pack lunch. And then also, but the biggest thing was just it was just so crowded, so overwhelming, and it was just way beyond anything at that time I could handle. And I didn't know about my sensory differences at the time, so there was that whole educational piece as well. Lastly, Zoe, how can our listeners learn more about and connect with you beyond this conversation?
So my website is the same title as my business. It's infinityneurodivergentcare.com. And there you can find more information about me. You can contact me if you're interested in working with me or my coworker Emily at my private practice for counseling or coaching services. I also have a TikTok that I do a sporadic job making. Lately, I've been really good, but then sometimes I forget for like a month. But hey, I'm on it. And that is just called at Zoe Darazsdi.
Well, Zoe, it was a pleasure talking with you. I can easily see why you would be a wonderful counselor for so many people. Thanks so much for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much to Zoe for the conversation. To learn more about Zoe, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you after listening to this episode on what would it look like for schools to support student sensory needs before a student reaches a meltdown rather than punishing the student afterward. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.